Hello and welcome to our session tonight. This one is entitled Fear is Fuel. Turn what you run from into your greatest teacher. The session's pre-recorded, as you know, because you're not watching it live. So once again, there's nothing to contribute, nothing you have to share, and nothing you need to perform. You can simply just listen, pause the recording if something needs more time, sit with a question, just let something unfold slowly. And perhaps that suits tonight's subject rather well because tonight we're going to talk about fear. Not how to get rid of it, not how to conquer it, and certainly not how to pretend that every frightened feeling is secretly excitement, if only we think positively enough. Fear is far more interesting than that. Over the last four workshops, we've gradually been building a different relationship with ourselves. We began with "you're not broken," then "the map's not the territory," then "no part of you is the enemy." Last one, in fact, "you're more than the roles you've learned to play." Tonight, we take all of that into one of the places where it matters most. Because one of the strongest forces shaping a human life is not what we want, it's what we're afraid of. Sometimes those are two sides of the same thing. We want love and fear rejection. We want freedom and fear uncertainty. We want to be seen and we fear judgment. We want to change, but we fear losing identity, security, familiarity, which came with the old life. And so we find ourselves in a kind of strange position. Part of us is being called towards something, and another part saying, stay here. Don't risk it. Don't make yourself vulnerable. Don't find out. And if fear wins often enough, something begins to happen. Our lives become organized around avoidance. Not dramatically, usually very quietly. We don't apply for something. We don't speak up. We don't ask. We don't leave. We don't begin things. And then perhaps years later, we tell ourselves that just wasn't for me. When perhaps the truth was, I was frightened to find out. And that's what we're exploring tonight. Not fear as an enemy, fear as information, fear as protection, and sometimes fear as a sign that we've arrived at the edge of a larger life. Fear is not one thing. There is a mistake we can make when talking about fear. We can become so enthusiastic about personal growth that we begin treating every fear as something which must be challenged. And that's quite frankly nonsense. Sometimes fear is extremely useful. If you're standing on the edge of a cliff, I recommend listening to it. If somebody behaves in a way that genuinely feels unsafe, fear may be giving you important information. The nervous system is designed to protect life. We'd not survive very long without it. So tonight's not about teaching yourself that fear equals growth. It's about learning to become curious enough to distinguish between different kinds of fear. There is fear which says something's wrong here, and there's fear which says something's unfamiliar here. And those can feel remarkably similar inside the body. There's fear of genuine danger, and there's fear of exposure, of a humiliation, of not knowing, fear of losing control, fear of discovering that the person we thought we were may need to change. And perhaps one of the most valuable skills we can develop is learning how to stay present long enough to hear what fear is actually saying. Because if every frightened feeling automatically means stop, fear becomes the author of the life. And if every frightened feeling automatically means push through, we can become reckless. The middle way is listen, understand, then choose. Fear as protection, we touched on something I think important in the previous workshop. The parts of us which create difficulty are often attempting to protect something. Fear is perhaps the clearest example of that. Fear wants survival, it wants belonging, it wants dignity, it wants to prevent another painful experience. If you're rejected badly once, fear may try to stop you risking closeness again. If you failed publicly, fear may decide that staying small is safer. If somebody left, fear may try to keep relationships at a careful distance. Or if success brought pressure or attention you're not ready for, fear may even become frightened of succeeding. And there is something compassionate in recognizing this. Because otherwise we attack ourselves for being afraid, and then we have fear plus shame about fear, which is twice the burden. Fear itself may already be difficult enough. We do not need to add with what's wrong with me. We can begin instead with what are you trying to protect? And perhaps, what do you think would happen if I went forward? And that changes the dialogue, the conversation. Fear becomes a messenger rather than a dictator, and messengers can be listened to without being obeyed. The life built around avoidance, well, there's something else about fear which I think matters enormously. Fear is not powerful only in the moments when we feel afraid. Its greatest influence may be in all the things we quietly arrange never to encounter. If I'm afraid of rejection, I may become extremely good at never asking for much. If I'm afraid of failure, I may become somebody who plans beautifully and begins very little. If I'm afraid of being judged, I may become so agreeable that nobody ever quite knows me. If I'm afraid of loss, I may avoid becoming deeply attached. And the clever thing about avoidance is it often works. If you never ask, you cannot be rejected. If you never begin, you cannot fail. If you never become visible, fewer people can judge you. And so the nervous system goes, yay, excellent, we survived. Let's do that again. And this is how avoidance becomes reinforced. Relief teaches the brain. That was the correct decision. And next time, the fear appears sooner. This is why fear can gradually shrink a life without us really noticing. The boundary of the world becomes wherever we last turned back. And then perhaps the most important question is not what am I afraid of, it's what has my fear taught me not to approach? Because somewhere in that answer may be a door. Not always, but often. Fear and what matters. One of the most interesting things about fear is that it often gathers around things that matter. We rarely fear the judgment of people whose opinion means absolutely nothing to us. We do not usually fear failing at things we generally do not give a damn about. We do not fear losing what has no value. Fear can reveal attachment, longing, meaning. If I'm afraid of being seen, perhaps being seen matters. If I'm afraid of rejection, perhaps connection matters. If I'm afraid of failing creatively even, perhaps creativity matters more deeply than I've allowed myself to admit. Does not mean the fear is pleasant, it means it may contain information. And this is where I prefer the phrase fear is fuel to fear is the enemy. Fuel is not always comfortable. Fuel burns, fuel contains energy, and energy can be directed. The same bodily activation which becomes panic in one context can become courage in another. Not because we rename it with a clever trick, but because the meaning and direction of the energy change. Fear says something important is here. And then we decide what to do with that information. Growth at the edge of the familiar is a psychological idea. Should I say there is a psychological idea called positive disintegration. Comes from the work of Kazimierz Dabrowski. The idea is, very simple terms, is that development is not always smooth. There can be periods when old ways of understanding ourselves stop working before new ones have formed, and those periods can feel very unsettling. We may question values we once took for granted. We may realize that a role we live by no longer fits us. We may outgrow relationships, identities, ambitions, and for a while it can feel as though something has gone wrong. Sometimes, something has. But sometimes disorientation is also part of development. The old structure is no longer sufficient. The new one has not yet formed or is stable. And that can feel frightening. And I think it's important. This is important because many people interpret fear at the edge of change as evidence that the change is wrong. Sometimes fear simply means the familiar self cannot guarantee what happens next. Personally, I find that exciting, but not everyone does. And perhaps growth always contains a little of that. The old version of you knew the rules, even when the rules were painful. The unknown, that new you, does not yet. A first inquiry, I think, before we go deeper, I'd like you to think about one fear which has shaped your life. Not the most traumatic experience you've ever had. Choose something you can be curious about. Whether that's fear of rejection or failure, fear of conflict, of being seen, being alone, disappointing someone, making the wrong decision. So just let one come now, whatever that is. And instead of asking how to get rid of it, ask, What has this fear protected me from? Maybe it's embarrassment, pain, uncertainty, responsibility, perhaps grief. Pause the video if you need to do that. And then, what has this fear cost me? Again, pause the video if you want to allow some time. What have you not done? What have you delayed? What have you made smaller? Not to create regret, but to see the bargain clearly. Every avoidance strategy has a price. The question is whether the protection is still worth the cost. And now, what does the existence of this fear tell me matters? What is this fear telling me matters? Now that might be probably the more interesting question. If rejection did not matter, what does connection mean to you? If failure did not matter, what is it you long to create? If being seen frightens you, what part of you wants to become visible? Because there's something alive underneath the fear, something the fear has been guarding. Fear lives in the body. Fear is not primarily an intellectual experience. You can know perfectly well that something is safe and still feel afraid. And the body has its own memory. The chest tightens, the stomach turns, the breath changes, the muscles prepare, and the attention narrows. And that's why trying to argue fear away can often fail. A logical approach does not always work. The body is already responding before the debate begins. And this is where kind of meditation can become useful, not because meditation makes fear disappear, but because it teaches us how to stay near experience without immediately fleeing into reaction. There's a practice known as RAIN. Different teachers use slightly different language, but the basic movement is recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. I want to use the spirit of that tonight, not as 4 boxes to tick, more as a way of meeting fear. First, recognize fear is here. Not I'm weak, not this should not be happening, just fear's here. Then allow. Just allow it. Just allow it to be there. For the meaning for this moment, I'm going to stop fighting the fact that I'm afraid, not agreeing with everything fear says, not liking it, allowing the sensation to exist. Then investigate. Where is it? What does it feel like? What does it believe? What is it protecting? And then finally, nurture. What does this frightened part need from me in order to remain present without taking over? It might just be reassurance, time, a boundary, support, just a smaller step, or simply, I'm here. We can face this together. That's a very different relationship with fear. Yeah, just very, very different. Sitting beside the fear is quite an art, but you can do it. So let's make yourself comfortable. I'm going to go through a bit of an experience now. There's no need to force relaxation. In fact, fear doesn't require you to become deeply relaxed. It requires enough steadiness to remain present. So let the body be supported. Get comfortable. Allow your eyes to close in your own time whenever you're ready to just drift inside for a little bit. Feel the contact beneath you, the floor, the chair, the bed. Be aware of the weight and the feel of your body. Hear the room around you. Let the sounds remind you, you are here. Perhaps take one slightly deeper breath. As you breathe out, just allow yourself to relax into your natural rhythm. Bring to mind the fear you were considering earlier. Just enough to recognize it, not intensify it. Don't search for the worst possible version. Just let it be there. As you're doing that, perhaps an image comes to mind, a situation, a face, a thought. Just notice what happens in the body. Where does fear speak first? The chest, the stomach, the throat, shoulders, face. And don't say, oh, that's fear. For a moment, become more precise. Is it pressure, movement, heat, tightness, fluttering, hollowness? How are you experiencing that in your body? Notice the actual sensation. And perhaps something interesting happens when we move from the word to the sensation. Fear, that's quite large, that can be enormous. A sensation has edges, a location, movement. Just pause. You do not need to remove it. Just stay near it. Perhaps say inwardly, I know you're here. No need to say go away, just I know you are here. And then ask, what are you afraid will happen? What are you afraid will happen? Just allow that answer to come however it comes. Words, images, a feeling. Perhaps nothing too clear. Stay with the body. Perhaps fear says, I'm afraid you'll fail, or they'll leave, or you'll look foolish, or you'll not cope, or I'm afraid everything will change. Whatever the response, instead of arguing, just say, I understand why that matters to you. Just notice what happens. Fear may not soften immediately. That is fine. We're not performing a magic trick. Just ask another question. What are you trying to protect in me? Just listen for the response. Maybe it's dignity or hope, belonging. Perhaps some younger part that remembers pain. And notice that perhaps there is a moment when the fear begins to make more sense. Not necessarily pleasant, but understandable. And so place a hand somewhere on the body, if it feels comfortable, perhaps over the place where that fear is strongest, or over the chest. Just feel the warmth of your own hand. And imagine instead that instead of being inside the fear, you are sitting beside it. It is not the whole of you. It is something apart within you. Something you can accompany. And as you sit beside that fear now, perhaps it takes the form of a younger version of you. Might be an animal, might just be a sense of presence. Just allow whatever the imagination wants to do with that, to do it. It may just be the thought that fear is sat beside me. And just say to that fear, you do not have to disappear for us to move. You do not have to disappear for us to move. I mean, that might be new because perhaps fear has believed the only choice were stop or be destroyed. But there may be another way. Fear can come and you can move gently. Fear can speak and you can listen. Fear can remain present without being placed in charge. And so now ask, what would help you come with me? We're not asking how to get rid of it. We're asking, what would help it come with us? Just wait and answer. It might be, go slowly, take someone with you. Pause, prepare. Tell the truth. Do not force too much at once. Remember, we can leave if we need to. Just whatever comes. Fear may not be asking you to stop. It may be asking for a better way forward. And now ask something a little deeper. What are you guarding? What are you guarding? What is that lies behind the fear? It might be something precious, a wish, a value, a longing. It may be the fear of rejection guards the desire to love and be loved. Maybe a fear of failure guards creativity. Or a fear of judgment guards authenticity. A fear of loss guards attachment. Just let your own answer come. And as that answer comes, I wonder just how fear changes slightly. Not necessarily disappearing, but becoming a little more transparent. You can see what it is standing in front of you. A door. And perhaps you realize fear was not the door. Fear was standing at the door. The door leads somewhere. Perhaps it's towards a conversation, a new role, a creative act, a decision, a boundary, a relationship, a more visible version of you. You do not have to walk through it now. Simply see it. Be aware of it. And just notice the fear beside you. Perhaps say, thank you for showing me where this matters. And now imagine yourself standing. The frightened part stands too. And together you approach the door. You do not have to fling it open. Perhaps just place a hand upon it. Notice the body. Does fear increase or decrease? Whichever, that is okay. And just ask, is this danger? Or is this uncertainty? Don't rush an answer. Allow the body and the wiser mind both to contribute. If something feels genuinely unsafe, wisdom may be to step back. If what you feel is unfamiliarity, exposure, uncertainty, perhaps you can stay a little longer. One breath. And another. This is how the nervous system learns, not through being overwhelmed, through contact with something once avoided, while enough safety remains. Notice what happens when the door opens a little. You glimpse what is beyond. No need to enter completely. Just enough to know that the old boundary is not absolute. And then perhaps step back. Just look at what happened. Fear came, you remained. The body activated, you stayed in relationship with it. You did not have to destroy fear. You became larger than fear. Perhaps that's courage. Not a feeling which replaces fear, a relationship with fear which allows movement. Just allow those words to settle. Courage does not require fear to leave first. And so think of some ordinary future situation, a moment you'd normally avoid. As you do that, you can begin to notice that familiar tightening. And instead of immediately retreating, allow a pause. Discover a pause. And recognize fear is here. And then allow. I can feel this for a moment. Now investigate. What is this warning me about? And now nurture. What do I need in order to take one honest step? And it may be you choose not to act, and that can be wisdom. Or perhaps you discover, I can do one small thing. Send the message. Ask the question. Speak the sentence. Make the inquiry. Walk through the door. Not the whole journey, just one step. And maybe after that step, the fear is still there, but now there's something else beside it. Experience. Evidence. A little more trust in yourself. As your nervous system begins to learn new possibility. I can be afraid and still remain present. And perhaps over time, fear begins to change jobs. Less prison guard, more advisor. It can say, this matters, be awake, take care. And you can answer, thank you, I will decide. So just let that relationship settle. And allow the imagery to fade. Return to the sensation of the body, the support beneath you, the sounds around you. Take a slightly fuller breath. When you're ready, just allow your eyes to open. Just take your time, pause the video for a bit. Just allow yourself some space if you need to. Before we go further, perhaps, like I say, just pause that recording. Just sit with it for a moment. No need to rush. So when you're ready, take a piece of paper and write one sentence. Not your biggest fear, not the whole psychological analysis. Just write, fear has been trying to protect me from. Fear has been trying to protect me from. And then under that, the cost of that protection has been. The cost of that protection has been. And finally, what matters enough that I may be willing to feel some fear for it? What matters enough that I may be willing to feel some fear for it? Take your time. Pause the recording again if you need to. Fear and courage are not opposites. There is a myth about courage which I think causes people unnecessary difficult. We imagine courageous people as people who do not feel afraid. But if there's no fear, courage is actually useless. It's unnecessary. Courage belongs to the person who feels the fear and remains in relationship with what matters. That's a very different thing. It means you do not need to wait until confidence arrives. This is kind of one of those great traps. I'll do it when I feel confident. Perhaps confidence is what comes after you've done it several times. Perhaps the first step belongs to courage, and courage may look very unimpressive. Making a phone call saying, I don't agree, asking someone, can you help me? Going somewhere alone, submitting something which may be rejected, telling somebody how you actually feel. The nervous system may respond as though something enormous is happening, and perhaps from the perspective of your old map, something enormous is. You're crossing a boundary which once meant safety, and that deserves respect, not ridicule. The swish without the silliness. There's an NLP technique called the swish pattern, and I think we've looked at it in the past. And underneath all the rather theatrical ways it's sometimes taught, there really is one very useful idea. When the mind encounters a trigger, it tends to run a familiar internal sequence. A situation appears, the old image flashes up, the body responds, and the old behavior follows. What the swish pattern does is interrupt that automatic sequence and rehearse another one so often that the new response becomes easier to access. I do not want to turn this into a kind of flashy exercise. I want to use the principle much more simply. So just think of one situation where fear usually leads you to shrink back. Pause the video if you need to. Keep it manageable. See the moment just before the old reaction begins. Maybe you're about to speak, open an email, walk into a room. Just notice the old sequence beginning. Now freeze it. And allow the image to become slightly more distant. Not because the event is unreal, simply because you're stepping out of the automatic rehearsal. And now imagine another version of the same moment. Not a fearless version of you, a grounded version. You feel the fear. You breathe. You remember what matters. And you take one small step towards rather than away. And make that image slightly clearer. Notice the posture. Maybe it's superhero posture, maybe it's not. Your posture when you are in relationship with yourself. What is that posture? Maybe the face is softer, the breathing steadier. And now just let that old image appear briefly. And before that sequence completes, replace it now with the image of you remaining present and taking the step. Old trigger, new response. Do it again. Old image, sequence, quickly replace it now with that new, brighter image, you taking that step forward. And repeat that a few times. Pause the video and repeat it. Quickly have the old image, then flash up the new one, get rid of the old one. Bang, swish it away. Practice that several times, then come back to the video. Having done that, perhaps the nervous system begins learning that the trigger does not have to only have one ending. There is another road. It's not about wiring anything permanently in one evening, it's rehearsal, and rehearsal matters. What we practice becomes easier to access. The danger of making fear sacred. There is something else I want to kind of say actually about that, in fact, before we finish. Once people discover that fear can indicate growth, they sometimes start believing every fear must contain a profound spiritual lesson. And it really doesn't. Sometimes you're afraid because you're tired. Sometimes the body has had too much caffeine. Sometimes you're overloaded. Sometimes you're imagining nonsense. We all do it. Sometimes the situation genuinely is a bad idea. Fear is information. It's not revelation. It deserves attention, not worship. And this is where the work from the previous weeks comes in. You're not broken because you're afraid. The story fear tells is not automatically the territory. The frightened part is not your enemy. And beneath the fearful identity, you remain larger than the experience moving through you. You don't need fear to tell you who you are. You can listen and choose. And that's kind of the red thread running through all of this, a deeper question. What if fear disappeared tomorrow? In fact, I'd like you to try something slightly different. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake and one particular fear is simply gone. Not recklessness, not stupidity. The fear which has been holding you back has vanished. What changes? What is it you're going to do that you've delayed? What conversations are you going to have? Where do you stop pretending? What do you create? Who do you become more honest with? Take some time, notice what appears. Pause the video if need be. And if you've done that, now ask, do I actually need the fear to disappear before I begin any of that? Maybe some things need more preparation. Timing obviously can matter, but perhaps one part can begin while fear is still present. And that's where freedom starts becoming practical. So when you take a nice deep breath in, allow your eyes to close once more. Feel your body, that which supports you. And imagine yourself standing before that door again, the one fear has guarded. You do not need to open it completely. Feel the fear beside you. And as you do that, you notice that it's not blocking the door now. It's just standing with you. Perhaps place a hand over the heart or somewhere that feels right. And just say inwardly, I know you are trying to protect me. I will listen. And I will also listen to what matters. There is fear. There is longing. There is caution. And there is life. There is protection. And there is possibility. Placing your hand upon the door, just ask, what is one step I'm ready to take? Not the boldest imaginable step, not the step that proves something, the step which expands life without abandoning wisdom. Just allow something to come, a name, a conversation, a place, an action. And if nothing appears immediately, the unconscious mind can continue working. When you sense the step, imagine yourself doing it. Be aware of the fear. Feel the body remain. Notice the breath continue and watch yourself complete that one action. And notice that something inside learns. I moved. Fear did not decide everything. And I'll say that again. Fear did not decide everything. And perhaps that is what freedom feels like at first. Not fearlessness, more choice. The door may remain open. You can walk further when the time is right. And perhaps there'll always be new doors, new edges, new places where the familiar self says, I don't know who I'll be if I go through there. And perhaps, after everything we've explored together, there can be another answer. You do not need to know yet. You do not need to know yet. You can discover. Fear can come along too. But you can still go. Take a deeper breath. Feel the body, hear the room, and in your own time, open your eyes, feel good, relax, grounded. So, what I'd like you to do between now and the next session is make a private commitment. Write down one small action, not something enormous, not something theatrical, something which faces a fear that's been shaping your life. Something safe, something within your control, something which matters. Perhaps you send a message, ask a question. Maybe you say no. Maybe you say yes. Maybe you show something you've made, go somewhere, begin something, speak a little more honestly, whatever belongs to you. Write it down. Within the next week, I will, and then finish the sentence. Underneath that, I want you to write, I'm doing this because what matters to me is. I am doing this because what matters to me is. And that second line's important. We're not facing fear for the sake of facing fear. We're moving towards life. There's a phrase even, not a phase. There's a phrase I used at the beginning. What you avoid runs your life. What you face sets you free. And perhaps now we can make that slightly more precise. Facing something does not always mean defeating it. Sometimes facing fear means turning towards it and saying, tell me what you know. Sometimes it means listening and deciding, you're right, this is not safe. Sometimes it means listening and discovering, you're frightened because this matters. Those are very different messages. Wisdom is learning to hear the difference. The aim is not fearlessness. I'm not sure fearlessness is even desirable. Fear keeps us awake. Fear shows us where we're vulnerable. Fear reminds us what we care about. Fear has probably protected every person listening to this and probably every person in the world at more times than they'll ever know. But protection can become imprisonment when it never updates. And perhaps the work is to help fear learn that we're no longer the person we once were. We have more experience now, more choices, more language, more ability to leave, more ability to ask for help, more ability to tolerate somebody not approving, more ability to recover when something does not work. Fear may still say, be careful. And perhaps now you can answer, I will. But careful does not always mean no. Sometimes careful means one step, one conversation, one attempt, one moment of remaining present when you'd normally disappear. And after that, perhaps another. Until one day you look behind you and you realize that somewhere along the way, the boundary of your life moved, not because fear vanished, because fear stopped being the wall. It became information at the doorway, and perhaps courage was never waiting on the other side. Perhaps courage was the part of you that reached for the handle while fear was still standing there. So this week, when fear comes, do not immediately run. Do not immediately charge forward. Listen. Ask, what is protecting? Ask, what is it costing? Ask, what matters? And then decide. Because fear may have a voice, but it does not have the final word.